The Resurrection of Jesus Christ, a documentary narrative. Introduction. The resurrection of Jesus Christ is the cornerstone of the Christian faith, an event that transformed a small group of disheartened followers into a global movement. It is described in Christian theology as the bodily restoration to life of Jesus on the third day following his crucifixion. This documentary narrative explores the resurrection by synthesizing the biblical accounts found in the New Testament with historical analysis and archaeological context, providing a comprehensive view of this world-altering claim. The biblical accounts. The conviction that Jesus was raised from the dead is embedded in the earliest Christian writings. While the exact moment of the resurrection is not described in the canonical Gospels, they all provide detailed accounts of the empty tomb and subsequent appearances of the risen Christ. The empty tomb. The narrative of the empty tomb is a central element across all four Gospels, though they present the events with varying details. In the earliest account, the Gospel of Mark, women, including Mary Magdalene, visit the tomb early on Sunday morning to anoint Jesus' body, only to find the heavy stone rolled away and a young man dressed in a white robe, who announces that Jesus has risen. Matthew's Gospel adds dramatic elements, including a violent earthquake and an angel descending to roll back the stone, terrifying the Roman guards placed there to prevent the body from being stolen. Luke mentions two angelic beings and includes Peter running to inspect the empty tomb. The Gospel of John focuses heavily on Mary Magdalene, who finds the tomb empty, alerts Peter and the beloved disciple, and later becomes the first to encounter the risen Jesus, initially mistaking him for the gardener. Despite these variations, the core historical claim remains consistent. The tomb in which Jesus was buried was discovered empty by a group of women on the Sunday following the crucifixion. Post-resurrection appearances. Following the discovery of the empty tomb, the New Testament records numerous appearances of Jesus to his followers. The Apostle Paul, writing in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, dated around AD 53 to 55, provides one of the earliest Christian creeds, stating that Christ died, was buried, was raised on the third day, and appeared to Cephas, Peter, the 12 apostles, more than 500 brothers and sisters at once, James, and finally to Paul himself. The Gospels also detail these encounters. Jesus appears to two disciples on the road to Emmaus, Luke, to the disciples gathered in a locked room in Jerusalem, John, and to the disciples by the Sea of Galilee, where he reinstates Peter and issues the Great Commission to spread his teachings to all nations, Matthew and John. Historical and archaeological context. Historians and biblical scholars approach the resurrection by examining the historical data surrounding the event. Several key facts are widely accepted by scholars across the theological spectrum. Jesus was crucified and died, his tomb was found empty, his disciples had experiences they believed were appearances of the risen Christ, and the Christian church was established as a result of their preaching. The empty tomb in history. The historicity of the empty tomb is supported by several historical arguments. First, the early Christian proclamation of the resurrection occurred in Jerusalem, the very city where Jesus was publicly executed and buried. It would have been impossible for the movement to gain traction if the tomb was not actually empty, as the authorities could have simply produced the body. Furthermore, early Jewish polemics against Christianity did not deny the empty tomb, but rather attempted to explain it by claiming the disciples stole the body, as noted in Matthew chapter 28 and later Jewish writings like the Toldoth Jesu. This serves as positive evidence from a hostile source acknowledging the tomb**s emptiness. Additionally, the fact that women are recorded as the primary discoverers of the empty tomb lends credibility to the account. In first-century Jewish culture, the testimony of women was generally not highly regarded. If the story were a later fabrication, it is highly probable that male disciples would have been cast as the discoverers. Archaeological evidence. While archaeology cannot directly prove a resurrection, it provides crucial context that supports the plausibility of the biblical narrative. First-century tombs. Archaeological excavations in and around Jerusalem have uncovered numerous first-century rock-hewn tombs with rolling stones, known as Kokim tombs. These findings perfectly match the Gospel descriptions of the type of tomb owned by Joseph of Arimathea. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre. As discussed in the context of Jesus'*burial, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is the most historically and archaeologically supported site for the crucifixion and the empty tomb. Excavations have confirmed the presence of a first-century Jewish burial site in an ancient garden area, aligning with the Gospel of John/S description. Crucifixion practices. The discovery of the remains of Jehohanan, a first-century crucifixion victim with a nail through his heel bone, confirms the brutal reality of Roman crucifixion and the fact that victims were sometimes granted proper burial, supporting the narrative of Jesus/death and entombment. Scholarly theories and explanations. Given the historical data, the empty tomb and the disciples'/experiences, scholars have proposed various theories to explain the events. The stolen body theory. The earliest alternative explanation suggests the disciples stole the body. However, this is widely rejected by modern scholars because it fails to account for the disciples' genuine transformation and willingness to suffer and die for their belief in the resurrection. The swoon theory. This theory posits that Jesus did not die on the cross but merely passed out and later revived in the cool tomb. This is medically implausible given the severity of Roman scourging and crucifixion, and a half-dead, desperately in need of medical attention Jesus could hardly have inspired the disciples to believe he was the triumphant conqueror of death. Hallucination theories. Some suggest the disciples experienced grief-induced hallucinations. While this might explain individual visions, it struggles to account for group appearances, such as the 500 mentioned by Paul, and does not explain the empty tomb. For Christian theologians and many historians, the inference to the best explanation is that the resurrection actually occurred. It accounts for the empty tomb, the post-resurrection appearances, and the sudden, explosive growth of the early church centered on the resurrection message. Conclusion. The resurrection of Jesus Christ remains a profound historical and theological focal point. The biblical accounts present a consistent narrative of an empty tomb and a risen Savior. When examined through the lens of history and archaeology, the context of these events is firmly grounded in first-century Judea. The enduring legacy of the resurrection is evident in the birth and growth of Christianity, driven by the unwavering conviction of the early disciples that they had encountered the risen Christ.